Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Liveship Traders Trilogy. I'm joined with my friend Angela from Literature Science Alliance. So this is going to be a spoiler-filled chat. We're going to be talking about spoilers, and we're just kind of hang out and talk. I don't have an agenda, notes, anything. But because this is very character-focused, like a very character-led story, I reckon we could just talk about characters. And I think we need to talk about Malta because we both love her so much.
The internet hates Malta, and I don't know what they wanted from her, but I love Malta, and I loved her from, like, day one.
Yeah.
Like, first perspective chapter. I was like, oh, she's a mess. I'm ready.
She is. Yeah, I think she was a great way to elaborate on the world and the family dynamics, though, because they don't have a healthy family dynamic. They don't communicate well. They don't prefer each other or work through things in a very, in a thoughtful, respectful way. And everybody just kind of is trying to do their own thing and take care of themselves while also taking care of the family. And it just doesn't work. And Malta growing up in essentially what is a poor, rich family, she has a lot of privilege, and she has a lot of entitlement. And this child who is going through an age, she's 12, an age where kids are already tough to deal with. In her situation, it's like, it's not surprising that she's like, I'm going to grow up faster than I need to. I'm going to use my wiles to, get what I want out of people. And I just watch her and I'm just like, oh, sweet summer child. You have a lot of growing up to do. There's a lot of situations you're getting yourself in that are not going to go well for you. Yeah, and she's just she's frustrating, but she's so likable.
And I think for me, something that I liked, and this is just more like, so Ship of Magic, I don't know if it was the same for you. Reading the first 150 pages of it was incredibly difficult because I could just see how it wasn't going to be the story I wanted because it's Hobb. And if you read the back of the book, Althea's not getting this ship. That's not happening. And there's just injustice after injustice. Kyle's the worst. I'm so rage reacting to this book. And I'm like, oh, a character that's going to be the cause of their own injustice. It's not an outside force. She's just going to be a dummy and learn from her mistakes, and I just get to, hide here. It was like a safe place where I wasn't miserable.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I agree that the first 150 pages, you kind of have to get through those to really get into the story, because that's how long it takes for the inciting incident to get there. But even within those first 150 pages, I already knew I was going to like this more than the Fitz books, because first of all, I just love nautical fiction, but I was just a lot more invested in these characters than I ever was. Even Kyle, who was from his very first page, I was like, okay, you're going to be easy to hate. You're going to cause rage every time you open your mouth. And she wrote him so well.
So well. And so I don't normally do spoiler vlogs on my channel because I'd have to really be into it because they don't perform as well as other videos, right? You have to really love it. But I was I have so many thoughts about Kyle. I have Voxered everyone I know already, and I still have thoughts. I just need to yell at a camera, and that's how that first vlog happened. I was just so angry.
No, absolutely. Kyle, she does such a good job of writing characters to where they feel human. And when she wants to write a character like him, who's just he's just obstinate. He just refuses to listen or to view the world from anybody else's perspective. He just expects everybody to serve him. And if they won't, then he'll hit them. He'll manhandle them, down to his own son. So easy to hate.
Oh, yeah. And, also, not only does he do, reprehensible things, he's just actually really bad at his job.
Yeah.
He's not very good at what he does. He is that manager who's breathing down your neck, micromanaging you, and doesn't even have a good idea, but is convinced he is the gift to this company. That's Kyle. He's that person in our real lives, and it's just ugh.
Yeah, we all have a Kyle, don't we?
Yeah. Which is why, when some of my friends don't understand Kyle and think he's not a real person, I'm like, how have you not met a Kyle? You were so lucky.
Yeah. No, Kyles exist, and they are rough. Sorry to anybody whose name is Kyle.
And that's also funny because this, was written in the 90s, and actually on Urban Dictionary, Kyle is the male equivalent of Karen, but that was before she wrote this book.
No kidding.
Yeah, I looked it up, so I was like... Well, because it's also such a non-fantasy name in this book series where we have a bunch of fantasy names.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Everyone else has a name I would have never met on the street. Brashen, Althea, Ronica, Kethryn.
Hobb knew a Kyle, and she wasn't even subtle. She was just like, there you are, Kyle, you're in the book.
Exactly.
He does a really good job of reflecting the conflict of Bingtown too, though, right? Because the town is falling apart, and it's trying to survive, and it's looking at opening its trade to slavery because of that. And then Kyle is like, I'm bringing it in. I'm going to do this. And like, yeah, he's showing the reflection of that, and he is the direct consequence of getting involved in slave trade in a very like roundabout way through Kennett, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, Bingtown, I don't know if it was the same for you. Bingtown felt like a character, because I was so worried for Bingtown, like, all the time, because, like, especially through Ronica in the first book, you see how Bingtown used to be, even if it wasn't perfect, and what it's descending into in their economics. And I was just like, oh, I just want Bingtown to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes through so many moments. And I think getting to hate Kyle so much at the beginning, and then, like, knowing Kennett isn't supposed to be the character you root for, it was, like, really interesting seeing their actions side by side, because Kennett's also a bad person, especially once we get through the end of the book. Even knowing why he is the way he is, he's still not a good person.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, he was the force against slavery.
Right. Well, at least the force we got to see. Yeah, one of the forces that was active.
Yeah.
And Kennett is a really interesting character because I guess we talked about this in the DMs, that it's like, okay, you're a bad person, you have very selfish motives, but like you are doing things that I want to see done, so I don't like you, but like at least you're doing something. Until the third
It's like
book.
you're being manipulative, but also Winthrow does need someone to care, even if you're kind of pretending.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and it's not like his dad was any good, so are we happy that he's overthrown Kyle? Yes, but also you aren't a good leader, and you're better at your job at least. It's like...
And, like, poor Vivacia, like, she just, like, gets shunned by Winthrow. Kyle's taking advantage of her. Althea's nowhere around. So, like, of course she kind of connects with Kennett. It's like, I think because we get his perspectives, we know how much of a mixed bag it is. But if we hadn't gotten his perspectives, it would be really hard, I think, to interpret who he is. Because he's also so insecure in his head, which I don't think we normally get from these type of kind of acting macho characters, you know?
That's interesting. I guess I could see... I didn't really interpret him as insecure so much as just extremely calculated. Like, every time somebody made a move that he couldn't predict and couldn't control, he just tried to find a way to shift the situation so that he was back in control.
I mean, I think he was calculated, but I guess I'm remembering scenes, and granted, you've read this more recently than me, but I'm remembering scenes where he's, like, paranoid, or when he feels like he has to prove himself, and so I guess I just felt like he had a rawer internal insecurity than I'm used to from a character who on the outside is acting like, I'm going to be the king of the pirates, and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
I just felt like there was a dissonance between his internal monologue and who he showed to the world.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that there is. And I think now that you're talking about it, you could also kind of you could say that his relationship with Etta, the way he kept her distant, the way he only called her the whore, even in his own mind, he refused to use her name, like trying to always dominate, always be the one that's in control and on top, even in that relationship that he clearly had ties to. Like the fact that he always only went back to Etta, even when she was still like before he took her onto the ship, and the fact that he only wanted her and that he did take her with him, like he obviously did, there was something there, but he always kept that distance because he didn't want the vulnerability and he didn't want someone to really see inside of him. And speaking of the Vivacia, her connection with him was like such a shock to me. Did you kind of see that connection happening?
Well, I think, like, so Vivacia is, like, relatively young, right? And so, I think I was surprised, but, like, I kind of went with it, because it was kind of like Vivacia and Malta are, like, the same age in my head in terms of maturity. And it's like, oh, well, someone's actually taking care of you and wants you. No one's wanted her for herself up until that point.
Well, except for Althea, but even she left, and
that was, like, one day, you know, like, where is she then? So I don't know. I think it was jarring. I think what was the bigger shift is when Vivacia does she keep the same name? It's when we have, like, the internal dragon of Vivacia that comes
Bolt,
forth.
I think.
That was, like, really... Huh?
Bolt.
Yeah, Bolt. Like, that was something I was, like, really stressed about. I'm like, where's Vivacia?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Yeah, yeah. I felt like there was a piece of me that was like, Vivacia has to come back. We can't end the story with her just, like, losing herself. But at the same time, it really did feel like a death. And I'm used to Hobb, like, doing whatever she wants to her character. So I was like, this could be permanent. Like, we could end here. But yeah, what you said about her being the same age as Malta, I think is a really good point, because she had just been quickened. Is that what it's quickened, awakened?
I think that's the word they use, yeah.
Like at the beginning of book 1, and then her figurehead died. Well, Althea's dad, I think he was called a figurehead. All the terms are already slipping out of my brain. And then Althea was supposed to be who she bonded with, but that was kind of ripped from her. And then Wintrow was who she tried to bond with, but Wintrow didn't want to. And so, like, she's been tossed about, you know? So finally latching on to someone, like you said, I can, like, she's a kid, she's a child in as much as a ship can be. So I can understand her being deeply influenced, and we have the perspective of Kennett's internal monologue, which she doesn't have. So we can kind of see the two sides of him.
Although, like, once they heal Kennett, she suddenly does have access to his surface feelings.
That is a good point.
And, like, also with the ships, like, they're just so complex because, yes, there's Vivacia within the ship, but the Bolt also deserves to be there. Like, there's so much wrong with what was done to those poor ships.
There's so
much.
Like,
the commentary on, like, you know, servitude and slavery and everything, and, like, these ships, like, poor Paragon. Like, I know we're probably going to talk about him forever, but how his multiple personality situation is a mess. Because, like, you take all the memories of the people who die on you, so you have 3 individuals at least, and then you have the dragon that never got to be born. And it's just like, and when did you catch on that the dragon thing was happening? Because everyone does at different points.
It was about midway through book 2 that I was like, okay. So I think I was pretty late to the game, that I was fully locked into exactly what was going on. I
mean, I think that's when I figured it out.
Oh, really? Okay. I feel like I should have. I mean, I definitely was like, okay, there's something going on. Like, there's connections happening. But it wasn't until then that I was like, oh, okay. I see what's happening now.
Like, I think I had serpents and ships are close together after book 1, but I didn't extend that to, like, cocoons and dragons.
Yeah, totally. Well, but then you also had hints with, like, with Kennett's bracelet and the charm that was speaking to him, with Rain coming in as a member of the Rainwilders, and all of the mysteries that were being hinted at with them. It was like there were a lot of, like, little, like, there's clearly something connecting it all, but it was kind of hard to figure it all out until it finally all started coming out.
Yeah. And, like, should have known there were dragons. There's a whole, like, quartet of books in this world with dragons, but I think I was tricked because in Farseer we have dragons, and they're very different from these dragons. Sure. So I just assumed it was different dragons.
Yeah.
And you never finished Farseer, right?
No.
You never read it?
No, but I did have a friend who just, like, gave me a summary so that I could just move on.
Well, when did you ever notice that Amber was the fool?
So I actually watched your review for book 3 this morning, and when you were going on about that, I was like, what? I like, in the end, when she's carving, you know, Paragon out, and, like, I could tell that there was something there that was going over my head. Totally didn't get it. I
wouldn't have gotten it if it wasn't for, like, my friends talking to me about it and telling me all their theories. I'm like, okay, I guess I think you're actually right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a visual reader, so in Assassin's Quest, the fool becomes brown. Like, the skin color changes.
Yeah.
And I forgot that because I didn't change the color of the fool in my head when I was reading those words.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think that was what, like, confused me all the time. It's like, well, this can't be the fool. They're different skin colors. I'm confused.
It is really cool, though, that Robin Hobb, years and years and years ago, had her own version of world hopping going on.
Yeah.
That's really, like, that's so fun. And she does it in a similar way to how Sanderson does it, where it's like an Easter egg. It's not, if you don't see it, it doesn't matter, but if you do see it, it's fun.
Yeah, and, like, now having read half of Tawny Man, I see why, like, in theory, you should read both of them before, because, like, things that happen in Liveship kind of occur, although I do think you could still get the gist of stuff, and like I think you can read Liveships without Farseer and be just fine. It's just a matter of like which part do you want to spoil the other, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like I said, I didn't finish the Fitz books, and I didn't feel like there was anything that I needed that wasn't there, or anything that I read in Liveship that spoiled what I had read of the Fitz books.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the big one is the Easter egg of the Fool and Amber being the same. And, like, it takes place after the events of Assassin's Quest, I think. So, like, the dragon thing has already happened in the Six Duchies. But I think that's it in terms of connections between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that stays the same, because I do plan on skipping the next Fitz books and just...
My mom skipped to Rainwild, and she was very happy. So I think you'll be okay.
All right. I'm just going to do it then, because I just don't think it's for me, and I don't want to stop reading Hobb, and I feel like if I get into another trilogy that I'm not going to like that much, I'm going to stop reading Hobb. So I just need to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tawny Man is really well crafted, but I spend a lot of time being like, oh my god, Fitz.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I don't want that.
Yeah. And they're shorter books, but they take me longer to read, and I don't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's how I was. It took me a long time to get through the Fitz books. But anyway, back to Liveship. One thing that I think, since Hobb is such a good character writer, and since we were just speaking about Kennit, I think that Kennit is a really good example of the kind of character work that Hobb does. Because I feel like once I finished this trilogy, I was looking back at the characters, and Malta and Kennit are the two that stand out to me the most, that either, one, she knew exactly what she was going to do from the very beginning, or two, she just knows these characters so well that they just do what they should do, and not what plot needs them to do. Because if you look at, I'll talk about Kennit specifically. We haven't really gotten into some of his more atrocious deeds, but if you look at, like, if we look at the way that he was doing good things, but it was always self-serving, and he was always, as the reader, we can look at him and be like, you're not completely bad, but you're certainly not good. But that kind of character archetype that will do what needs to be done, but it's always for himself. And he'll help the people that he's going to help, but it's always for his own agenda. Then you get to see him in book 3, and when he rapes Althea, and you can kind of see that, like, okay, even if someone's doing good deeds, like, who they are is still going to determine the acts that they do in their everyday life, which I think is, like, it was so shocking to me. I didn't expect it to happen, but it was so true to the nature of the character that we had seen up to that point.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I think, like, reading the first 2 books, I'm like, okay, if we're in a traditional fantasy story, this antagonist could have a redemption arc. I could kind of see it. He's not, like, an amazing person, but I could see him being a part of the end of the book where he comes around, and then it's just like, oh no, he just is who he is. Granted, we learn a lot about potentially what triggers his character development early in life and why he kept on this trajectory. But it's like, yep, you are irredeemable at this point. You are just horrible.
Yeah.
So
I do agree. It was a hard line. It was a hard line that he crossed. And it wasn't really surprising necessarily, but it did track with his character, how it was all about, like, what can I get out of people? What can I get out of life? That meant
the need to be in control.
Yeah. And it's so unfortunate that so much of what happened in the aftermath was such a reflection of what's already happened to Althea in the past. People saying, like, you're a woman, or, like, a whore there is no to a whore, and because you've had sex before, then there is no for you. And
it was so anger inducing.
Yeah. And you know, when Althea's sister had responded with, okay, but what did you do to put yourself in that position, to provoke it, to whatever, to give that impression? And then that's exactly how other people were responding, where it was like, nobody believed her, nobody wanted to hear her, everybody just wanted to believe that Kennit was good, to the point that they shut down someone who is in such a desperate state. It was very difficult to read.
No, but I didn't even think about it, but it is like a bookend to the beginning of the series, because part of my frustration at the beginning was like, why is no one believing Althea about how bad Kyle is? And then we end the book, in a similar way, and yeah, no, it was really frustrating. And like, I personally, you saw in the video, I didn't love how Althea's arc kind of went. I think it kind of went an untraditional Hobb way, where I think Hobb wanted us to be left in a hopeful, happy part, so she had to like rush some things, and also like kind of dealt with some, I think, trauma and mental health stuff the way people just did in the 90s. And it's just like nowadays in like 2022, I'm like, this magic therapy is not like, I think, a good answer to this, but okay.
Yeah, I didn't care for the falling action in this book. I thought the climax was phenomenal. I was really happy with everything until we got to, okay, now let's look into the future at where the direction everybody's going in. And I actually felt like the whole thing was really clean. And I didn't expect for it to be like, and Wintrow is going to probably end up with the woman that he loves and raise this kid, and he's got a good future for her, and why can't it... Kennett's...
Etta,
thanks. I don't know. I just lost her name for some reason. Etta is the pirate queen, which I actually super loved. And she's going to, continue on that. And Bingtown looks like it's doing good. The whole family looks like they're... Malta and Rain, which we should talk more about them. They're looking good. They accept each other. They love each other. Things are good. And it's just like good. And as I was reading through it all, I was just like, this is like really clean for a Hobb book, like a really clean ending.
Yeah.
And then we got to the Althea stuff, and that was when I was like, oh no, don't like, because...
Yeah, everything else I could kind of accept, in the Althea stuff, I was like,
yeah,
I know why you're doing this, but I don't like it. It didn't feel earned. I think that's the thing. Normally everything in a Hobb book feels earned.
Yeah.
And some of the other stuff did, but like the Althea stuff, even though she tried to put in time skips to be like, it's actually been a year and stuff, and I'm just like,
yeah,
it didn't feel like a year to me though.
Exactly. And I think it could have very easily been shifted slightly so that the book ended with her beginning to speak with Brashen about it openly and beginning to allow him to touch her without her flinching, and just like really starting to work through it. And their arc could have ended on the beginning of them working together through it, rather than magic fix, which I just didn't like. I didn't like him being like, I'm gonna leave the memories. It really did happen to you, but the pain's gone. So like, move forward in good health.
And the fact that Paragon was like, I have a right to do this because it was partially like, because of the whole Kennett Paragon kind of being sort of together thing. And I'm like, but even then, that's not how healing works.
No.
Like, if you are hurt by someone, that person saying I'm sorry doesn't make everything better.
Yeah.
Like, that's not...
Right. Yeah. And just last month, I finished reading the Beartown trilogy, which is all about a rape and like the repercussions and the long-lasting damage. And in the final book, there's a big emphasis on like, you don't get better from this. Like, you are haunted by this for the rest of your life. You may be able to get some healing, but forever you will be looking behind your back. Forever you will be making different decisions out of fear. Like, and really honing in on the fact that rape isn't something that you just get better from. It's something that is a forever trauma, which I appreciate that reflection of it, because I think that it needs to be spoken about very bluntly. Yeah. And like you said, in the 90s, sexual assault was just kind of something that's like not talked about so much, swept under the rug. So this ending really felt like kind of a sweeping under the rug instead of an acknowledgement of a lifelong trauma that she will forever have to live through, even if she can find healing.
Yeah, and I do think if Robin Hobb had written the end of this series today, she probably would have handled it differently, because, like, except for that, everything else, like her commentary on the different ways of being a woman, the feminism laced throughout the series, is actually really good and, like, kind of stands the test of time in really good ways. We have so many different women being women in very different ways.
And women being strong in very different ways.
Yes.
And I completely agree with you. And I also think sexual assault is something that comes up frequently throughout this trilogy with our female characters. And I do think that around every corner, even in the aftermath of the rape, she handled it very tenderly and very respectfully. This was the one instance that I just really actively disliked. So I do agree with you that a lot of it is just a sign of the times and not Robin Hobb, like, being I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to like push some sort of morality on her, because I do think that she genuinely tried. It wasn't just like rape's a part of this world because I want a dark world. It was very intentional.
Yeah, no, it wasn't so much the rape scenes that bothered me. It was just the falling action for Althea, and like, I think it was definitely Paragon's intervention, which I think at the time, like, I've listened to a lot of my friends who read this when they came out and like are a generation different from me. A lot of people when they read it in the 90s saw it as like a gift. They saw it as like this very happy thing, and like to me it felt like the opposite because of like my relationship to mental health and therapy. I'm like, that's not my take. And I get it. 90s were different. We barely talked about mental health, so like fair. Like
Absolutely. Mental health and sexual assault both were not in the forefront of discussions like they are. They're not so heavily. They are much more heavily talked about now. And speaking of like the trauma and the mental, all of that is a lot more openly spoken about now, and it should be. But I think that it was just a fumble and not like...
Yeah, I didn't feel malice in it. I was just like...
Yeah. I didn't like it in the moment. I Voxered my friend, and I was just like, can I tell you what just happened to me? Because I was very bothered by it. But no, I do very much agree that it's a sign of the times. But honestly, that is my one complaint about the book. I think that the trilogy was just like tops. It was so good.
It was so freaking consistent. Like, people are like, what's your favorite book? It's like, I guess technically, because the ending wasn't perfect, Ship of Destiny's not my favorite. And maybe Mad Ship, because it has my favorite... I don't know if this is actually a trope or what to call this trope, but I've been calling it the we're building a boat trope, because it happens in a lot of movies I like, too, where everyone's montaging building a boat together.
Yeah.
And I just like the team coming together and, like...
That's so specific. That's such a specific thing to love.
But it happened in, like, Winter Soldier and the Falcon Winter Soldier when I watched it. My favorite episode is when they were fixing a boat, and then, like, Forrest Gump when they're fixing the boat. Like, I don't know what this trope is.
That's amazing.
And sometimes
okay.
I use it...
No, go ahead.
Well, like, sometimes that trope I refer to is just, like, when we're, like, fixing a situation, right? Like, everything's burnt down and we have to rebuild the house, right? Like, that whole... Coming together to rebuild something with a group of people I've gotten to follow is, like, a thing I love in literature and in movies and stuff like that. So that's in Mad Ship. So I really like Mad Ship. And we get more Paragon in Mad Ship.
Paragon's an amazing character.
And Malta starts to actually, like, really... Because, I mean... I think as a fantasy reader, also the reason I liked Malta is like, oh, I know she's going to have a fantastic arc. I am here to be convinced that her arc's going to be phenomenal, and you start to see that in Mad Ship.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yes. And I agree with you. Mad Ship's my favorite of the three as well, but I also agree with you that it's like they're so close that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think because Ship of Magic is very much a book. It's 900 pages of we're beginning something. So while it was really good in its own right, it also was like you read it and immediately felt like I have to keep reading to really get any sort of payoff for anything. And then Mad Ship is when payoff begins. It's when arcs really start to move, a lot of really exciting reveals for the world, action, like a lot of great stuff happens there. And then in book 3, I feel like Malta's arc is just pits of despair in Ship of Destiny, which she handles. I love
that she got stuck with the set trap. I'm like, this serves you right. I'm so excited for you to meet you. I had a lot of fun reading Malta.
I'm so excited for you to meet you. That's brilliant. I never thought of it that way, but that is spot on. It's
because she was already growing, and I'm like, oh, you're about to see what everyone else has dealt with when they deal with you, and...
Yep. Wow, that's a really good thought, because I feel like a lot of Hobb's character work and what's going on internally with characters really reflects what's going on in the world and in the conflict in Bingtown and stuff like that. But that's a connection that I totally didn't see, where Malta gave everybody such a rough go because of her entitlement, and then she's stuck in a room on a ship with this brat who's like basically the amplified version of what she's always been. And now she has to deal with caring for him. Oh, that is some sort of sweet justice.
And then, like, then when she does get to completely blossom, I'm like, you've served your time. I have forgiven you for all of your past, transgressions. Because she was a brat. Like, I'm not going to say people who don't like her.
She was a brat.
Yeah, she was a spoiled brat. It was a very well-written spoiled brat, though. And, like, I have written some really bad versions of spoiled brats in books. Like, the precocious, pretentious little brat kid in a book. I've read that many, many times, and this was like, no, that's what a 12-year-old would be like in this scenario. A daddy's girl who just wants to dress up way too fancy, use way too much makeup. Like, I remember that time in, like, kindergarten and first grade where, like, all my next-door neighbors kept wanting to wear all this makeup. I'm like, I don't know what this is. Why does this have so much glitter?
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. And you know, going after older men, like, she even went after Brashen at one point. And, yeah, like, there were a lot of decisions that she made that was just, I think, she knew what she was doing, obviously, but I think she didn't realize how potentially dangerous the situations she was getting into were, like presenting herself to older men, especially in this society, in this time, how easily she could have been very badly harmed in those situations. And then, too, also the way she viewed Rain when he first was, you know, trying to woo her and giving her the dream box, and then she takes the dream box and basically gaslights everybody in her family, where she's like, I can't believe you never believe me, you never want to trust me, you always assume the worst in me. And it's like, it's literally under your pillow. She reminded me what are you on about? She
reminded me a little bit of like a Scarlett O'Hara character, which I do like that type of character archetype too. I don't know if you've seen Gone with the Wind or read it, but like she reminded me of that sort of thing. And I think another reason why I was a big Malta defender early on is like, we have been conditioned in fantasy to like an Althea-like character. Like, that's, like, I mean, she's very likable, but, like, the tropes, the archetypes that she falls into, she's very rootable. But it's like, she's fighting against the patriarchy, and so is Malta. Like, Malta's like, this is the only way I can have power, is by using my wiles. And I'm like, so we all hate Malta for doing it because she's doing it this way, but, like, they're doing the same thing. They're very similar people fighting against stuff, and we just don't like Malta's version.
That's a good point. I think the difference in a lot of people's eyes is simply that she's 12. So, one, like, it's not safe for her to be doing it right now. And two, she's 12. 12-year-olds are hard to like. Like, it's just a rough age.
It's true.
So, it's easy to just look at her personality and her flaws and be like, you're annoying. But, like, I always loved her because I just saw in her, like, a little girl trying to grow up too fast, and I was afraid for where that was going to lead her. And I was so happy when it led her to being with a safe man, Rain, who genuinely wanted to protect her, and being put in positions where she rose to the occasion. My father is in danger. I'm going to do something about it. My town is crumbling. I'm going to slap everybody in the face and say, look at the numbers. Let's figure this out.
I still think about that scene. That's such a good scene.
It was such a good scene. Yeah. Yes, it was. And that was the first moment that we got to see her really just stepping up to the plate. When it really mattered, she was like, all right, I'm going to think about everybody else now. And she was kind of the glue that held everything together for a while.
Yeah, because they were all just fighting.
And then her brilliant sacrifice. Yeah. She's an amazing character.
No, she's an amazing character that was, like, given the space by Hobb to be as flawed as she is and to make the mistakes she was made, but then, like you said, also have the opportunities to rise to the occasion. And you're right, it felt like a character who was just doing things that made sense to them. Like, it completely makes sense that she loves her father so much that she's like, wait, we're having these issues and we're all just fighting and we're not agreeing on what to do next. You guys always tell me to look at the numbers. All right, we're going to sit down and look at the numbers because I need my dad.
Yeah. 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 And again, like, from the reader's perspective, it's like, okay, you're 12, but also, or 13 at this point, but also, like, your dad is not, when you bring him home, it's not going to be good. You know, he's not good to your mom. He's not good to your family. He's not good.
Yep.
So it's like, I understand that you're a little girl who wants her dad, but you also have a very warped idea of who your dad is. So it's like, oh, yeah, Malta, go. But then it's also like, don't save him, though. Fail. But, like, grow up.
I was kind of glad that Kyle didn't get to come home, which is, I know, mean, because his biggest sin is just being an asshole. Like,
yeah, but, like, a really, really big one.
But, you know, like, it's, like, I mean, we had more reprehensible situations and people. Like, the satrap, I think, is actually probably one of the worst characters. Like, we don't get a lot of page time with him, but, like, what he does to, we haven't talked about her, but I can't remember her name. She comes to Bingtown at the end of Mad Ship.
Oh, the woman that travels with them and then dies.
I can't remember her name.
Yeah, I can't remember her name either. Isn't her name Selah?
It might be. I don't think it had an L in it. I thought it had R's, but I don't know why. But, like, what he did to her by, like, giving her to the ship hands and then, like, he was definitely a representation of patriarchy and, like, transferring power based off, you know, hereditary lines and not, like, who would be the best to do stuff, like, where it can go very wrong very quickly.
Absolutely. And he made those same threats to Malta, too. If she doesn't serve him just right, then she'll be given over to the ship hands as well. And as every time she walks through the ship's deck, you know, they made very clear that they'd be happy to take that bargain on if the satrap decided to do it. And I'm really, really grateful that Hobb didn't go there, because she definitely could have. And I was very worried that she would. I'm very glad that we didn't do that, because I don't think we needed to for her story.
No, and I think the ending of Ship of Destiny before the falling action is, like, the reason I think we all read fantasy, which that, like, here comes the cavalry moment that felt earned and didn't feel like it was too out of it. I was like, oh, this is so good. I just loved it all.
Yeah. No, yeah, she does her big climaxes really well, especially in the Liveship books, where it all feels earned. All the little pieces were always there. And then when people do rise to the occasion and the serpents show up and, like, everything happens, it's like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. And she does, you said you don't really recognize pacing too much, but her books are very slow. But when it's time for the action, like, she hits that pacing.
Yeah. No, and I just remember, like, the dragon coming. It's just so cinematic. It's so fun. It's so epic. Like, it's truly, like, an epic moment when we really just had a family drama for, like, 80% of this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And the fact that Malta's physical transformation was, like, being touched by the dragon, and it was actually a blessing and not a curse. And when Rain saw her, and I totally thought Rain was dead. I really thought he was dead. And I was dying, because I really liked Rain a lot. Did you have any opinion on him?
I thought it was really nice. Yeah, I mean, I liked their weird little, like, Regency romance thing that was going on. I was just like, yeah, he's really nice. And, like, I was a little nervous, because I'm like, oh, you're kind of getting on, like, the toes of your family, and what's happening with this last dragon? Like, I was nervous about things. I don't think he's, like, a standout character for me, but I liked him, and I liked him with Malta. I thought he brought out a good side of Malta, and, like, was kind of a catalyst for helping her see other paths, as well as the catalyst of just, well, we need to step up to the occasion. It was, like, kind of both-ish. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I understand that. I think a big part of my affection for him comes from the amount that I was interested in the Rainwilders. Their particular customs and cultures and appearance and the mysteries that we're hiding. Like, it was all just the most important part of the book to me. So with him being a good guy that was providing a refuge for Malta, it was like all things align. I love it.
The Rainwilds are so fascinating, in that river, and, like, why is it acting like radiation? Like, I don't know what happened to the elders, and it was. I hope we get more answers to that, because, like, that's the thing, is, like, this happens in every Hobb series where it's like, this is important, but we're here for the characters. I'm like, yeah, but you could give me more answers. We could info dump a tiny bit more.
Just a little bit. Like, just a little bit. Just let two characters sitting in a room talking for 14 pages is not un-Hobb. So let's just do that with some information on the world. But I do think that we'll definitely, in the Rainwilder trilogy, we'll get more information and more reveals on all that. And I bet it'll all tie back into a lot of what we've seen in this trilogy as well. Because, they're already pretty connected.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think another thing Hobb does, like, I mean, we love these characters and the moments are wonderful, but, like, she's, like, I think obviously one of the big themes of this whole series is, like, generational trauma and, you know, you know, and, like, you get that from the serpent level all the way up to, like, the human level and then the individual level. We get it, like, societal, serpent, like, evolution, and I'm just like, how did you do all of that? Like...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's very, very good at tying character arcs, world elements, and theme all together so that they're all working, like, they're all doing the same thing but individually, which makes her books feel so cohesive and deep. I really love the way she does that. Which, speaking of generational trauma and speaking of all of that, we should talk about Paragon.
Oh, poor Paragon.
Because Poor Paragon. We talked earlier about, like, that's not how mental health works when we were talking about our one complaint about the series. But, like, she does, despite that being true, that's not how mental health works, she does explore mental health very, very well in this series in other elements, like with Paragon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also part of why the ending was annoying to me. Because it's like, I felt like I really liked the representation and the character of Paragon so much, and then to use him like that for that moment was annoying to me.
Yeah.
But, like, I just really liked him, and I loved his relationship with Amber. And now, and, like, at the time I didn't know Amber was the fool, but the fool's, like, need to, like, take in lost sheep really came on full display there.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, his bond with Amber was beautiful, and him really going back and forth. And Hobb did a really good job, too, with mysteries surrounding Paragon, because he was a character that had a lot of information that could have very easily given to us in a lot sooner, but it made sense why he would be withholding with the amount of trauma he had and turmoil, and we got a lot of hints through him with things that he would just throw out there where he was like, I am two people, so who's to say? You know, and you know, his hinting at having a past with Kenneth and everything. There were a lot of really good hints in there that make your brain go whir, but that never enough until the right time to know it all. It was done so well.
No, it was exactly the same way for me, where it's like, okay, I know you're related to this one pirate king, I think. Like, I think that's kind of clear, and that affected you and your family, but the Kenneth piece, even though, like, in hindsight, it's kind of obvious, didn't really click into place until the book told me directly. Like,
yeah. I definitely knew pretty early in book 3, I knew that he was connected to Kenneth, but how?
Yeah.
I didn't know until the book directly told me. Yeah, that was did not expect.
Well, like, so our point of views this entire time, except for, well, actually, no, he's also, everyone's a live ship, like a traitor. Everyone's a traitor of live ships, and we didn't know that because we thought Kenneth was just a pirate who was on the outside, but everyone was a part of Bingtown. Like, that's all of our perspectives.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy that all paths lead there. And it's, like, such an important... And I felt like the politics of Bingtown, while I was always happy to be reading about it, was the least interesting part of the book. But then even seeing that even Kenneth is tied in there just added even more layers to how significant Bingtown is and how, I don't know, it was done really, really well.
So, we haven't talked about this one live ship that wasn't Paragon. What's her name? Was it Olivia? Or what was... She was the sassy live ship.
Yeah, the super fun one that wanted Althea and Greg?
I think it was Gregor? I don't know, something with a G.
Gregor? Something.
Well,
she wanted them together. What was her name?
Octavia? I'm thinking O, but I could be really wrong.
No, you're right. It's definitely O.
Well, regardless, I was so annoyed and frustrated at the end of Ship of Magic, where she's like, well, you should have told the live ships. We would have never let Vivacia leave. And I'm like,
yeah,
communication was the answer all along. Of course it was.
Yeah, well, this family sucks at that, so shocker, it didn't work out.
Right? I'm just like, It's like, yeah, we would have never let her be a slave ship.
Oh, that's so rough. I forgot about that.
Right? It was so anger-inducing.
No.
I'm just like, and then, you know, she gives us this kernel that I knew would never pay off, where it's like, now Althea has hope that everything will be right. It's like, oh, Althea, you don't know what's happened to the Vivacia that I know.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, it's so rough.
Like, Althea's entire journey is, I want to get my ship back, and you kind of know you're never going to get your ship. And that she never does.
I definitely thought she was going to get her ship.
Well, it's what I wanted. But the thing is I know with a Hobb book, I won't get what I want. So I have to assume she went the other way.
Yeah. I honestly, especially after Kenneth died on Paragon and they kind of became one, I was like, ain't no way that she's going back on that ship. Because, like, that's really complicated. Yeah. That's a real complicated dynamic right
Especially
there.
Especially with
and
the
I think
eyes.
that's partially...
Like, I feel like the eyes are so, like...
Oh my gosh!
It was uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a big reason why Hobb decided to go the route that she went, because in order to make this work, she had to be okay with looking into her abuser's eyes every single day for the rest of her life. And, like, it didn't land, but...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Because before that moment, I knew I was really mad at Kenneth, but I also equally knew Kenneth must die with Paragon for me to be content as a reader.
Oh, sure.
And so, like, I had that emotional investment there, but then, once my brain went, oh no, now Althea's here, and Brashen's not leaving the ship. how are we going to resolve this? And the answer was not in the way I wanted. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I just really, really hoped that, and it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense because obviously Althea and Brashen were going to end up together. And obviously in order for that to happen, they couldn't be sailing separate ships, living separate lives, and then just coming together every now and then. It had to be something more sustainable than that. But I don't know. I guess I was hoping Brashen would go on to the Vivacia, but that wouldn't work either. Like, there was no solution that was really going to be perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's also, like, when we have the whole mad ship arc for Althea, where she, like, legitimately is like, I can't be with you because I want a life of my own. I want to have my own agency. Like, I can't just be your wife who's at home and occasionally gets to be on your ship. And then literally her life decisions are based off the fact that Brashen's going to be on the Paragon.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That's a good point. Actually, you know what? That's a very good point. And speaking of that, that reminds me of another really essential plot thread that I felt was a little bit just dropped, or character decision that was a little bit dropped, and that was with Kenneth, with his decision to have Etta and Wintro have a baby together so that his child could, that whole mess. What was that?
I forgot about that, and Hobbs' need to have really weird sex things for children.
That is a theme with her. Oh man, the 90s. Anyway, his decision that he was going to, and that was another really telling thing about Kenneth, where he was like, I want these two to spend time together, develop a relationship, and have a kid together. But then every time they bonded, he would get jealous because he still wanted to be the dominant. He still wanted to be in control and the one that everybody needed. I don't know, it was a weird. Anyway.
No, it was really odd, and I remember reading that. It's like, are we in Assassin's Quest again? This is so weird.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure someone told you what happened in Assassin's Quest.
Yeah, that was a big choice. That was a big part of me choosing
There were some
to just
choices
move on.
made.
Yeah, I didn't really want to read that, so I just kept on going. But anyway, I still got some version of it. But anyway, Etta hadn't even told him yet that she was pregnant by Kenneth. And Kenneth decided to just, without even acknowledging it, abandoning his grand plan. And he was like, Althea's my girl now. She's the one I'm going to have. But Wintro can't have a baby by Althea. I guess his plan was he was going to have a baby by Althea,
and then
it would still be the
be the connection
bloodline
to the ship. Yeah.
I guess that must have been where his head went. But even still, Althea and the Vivacia, we're not bonded anymore. And it was he should have just kept on with his original plan. It felt like a weird shift to me, but I guess now that we're talking about it, I do understand.
I mean, I can't remember the course of events, but the plan might not have needed to be as important once Bolt was around, because then I think bonding with Bolt was a completely different thing, right?
That's a good point, too. I guess.
And I think the Althea thing was definitely just a being in control kind of situation for Kenneth.
Oh, it was. It absolutely was. It was about dominance, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, don't approve of, but yeah.
Do agree.
Well, especially whenever he had those uncomfortable thoughts about Wintro as well. I was just like, sir.
Oh no. Yeah. Which, again, it just reinforces the themes of generational trauma. Him not being able to escape his own past and then just trying to continue to. Oh man, that was rough.
Like trying to rationalize what was done to him by doing it to others and being like, but it's they should be happy I'm doing this, which is meant I should have been happy, so I was never wrong. Like, I can see the stupid cogs in his dumb thought process.
Yeah. But yeah, which it is kind of good. I mean, it's not good. It's all bad. But it is kind of good that she did have a defining moment of, this guy who has been, because I think it was easy to look at some of his more subtle bad acts, how he was treating people, how he was manipulating people, and just kind of be like, but, he's also doing good. And with this, it was like there was a hard line drawn.
I think, so a lot of people always, talk about, is Robin Hobb close to Grimdark or not? And, I think he's the closest to, a Grimdark character. He could be in an Abercrombie book in my head. If that makes sense. No,
I agree. He has enough nuance that he would certainly fit into an Abercrombie. That's an interesting question. I would say that she could be if there was a spectrum, if there was a gauge, she would be like at the very front of grimdark, maybe, because
I'm really bad at subgenres. I just know people talk about it all the time, and I'm like, I guess it's depressing, but I don't know.
Well, grimdark is kind of a lucid definition anyway. Like, it is or it isn't. No one really, there's no hard lines. But I could definitely see it because she does dig into grim realities in her fiction very, very strongly. She just doesn't feel the need to dig into it so deep that it becomes like all you see. She's good at providing a lot of balance, like Abercrombie is.
Yeah, no, I think that's how I felt reading Kennett. I was just glad that we only had one Kennett, and like everyone else was obviously not like necessarily 100% good or in the right all the time, but they were easier to root for.
Yes,
like
I agree. I agree with that. Sorry, I'm going back to what you said about the O ship and her saying like, if you would have just told us, we wouldn't have let it happen. And I'm thinking about how she did go to people, like she went to the council and she tried to get people on her side. She just went to the wrong people. She should have gone to the ships. And that's like, it's like, just barely missed it. And that's so sad.
Yep. And I mean, part of that comes down to the fact that although people loved their live ships, they didn't think of them as their own people.
Yeah.
They didn't give them that agency or anything like that. They were owned. They were servants, you know, like they weren't, no one saw them with their own power or agency. And then, you know, she brings it up. She's just like, we would have just, everyone would have stopped trading. And then everyone, like, the economics of the situation would have forced it.
That's a good point. And that, again, reinforces the themes of what's been happening with live ships all this time and their agency and their free will being taken away from them as a general rule. And then Althea not viewing them as individuals as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think they were viewed more as, like, beloved, useful pets.
Sure. It's funny because I do think that Althea valued Vivacia beyond that. She just didn't value other live ships beyond that because she didn't have the bond.
Yeah. No, I think the live ships are just, like, a fascinating, like, analogy metaphor. I don't know the exact literature term at the moment, but they were just, like, they encapsulated so many things in such a not beating you over the head sort of way, but it's like, if you're watching this, you are going to follow the thematic thought she wants you to. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's one reason why she's such a phenomenal author is she has a lot of themes that she does explore in her books without, like, outright speaking to the reader. She just does it in this very natural way in the story that invokes those conversations.
Yeah. You know, the one person we haven't talked about a lot, and I think that says a lot, but it's Wintrow.
I was just thinking that too. Because, like, so Kyle is a character that in book one, you would think he's going to play a huge role. And it's kind of surprising how much he's sidelined in the series. And Wintrow is a character that rises up. And you're just like, oh my goodness, he's one of the stars. And then he's just like, nah, not really. We won't talk about him hardly at all in the final book, actually.
Yeah, like, because, I mean, his issues with finding what he wanted from life, because he's also pretty young. He's older than Malta, but he's like, what, 14, 15? Like, he's not that old. So by the end of the trilogy, what is he, 16 or 17? I don't really know how many years have passed. He's, I guess, probably an adult by Bingtown standards, because everyone's a young adult there. But it's just like, the first book, I think, was his book. Like, that was the book where we saw the most Wintrow development and his, like, back and forth with Vivacia, him wanting to be a part of the church and his role with the church and all that. Him also losing his will. Yeah, the fact that his father sells him to slavery and that whole thing.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that entire thing that happened in book 2. Was that book 2?
No, it was book 1.
Slavery
was book 1. Yeah.
And they let him get his slave brand just
and
to
they
prove
had it
a
be
point?
Vivacia.
Oh, that was rough. Wow.
That was another bad time.
Oh no. Yeah.
And that was after, like, so it was like a lot of gut punches in that section because he leaves Vivacia, so Vivacia's abandoned again, and then he instantly gets, like, trapped in slavery, and then the right-hand man is like, oh, I'll tell your dad, and then he gets sold, and it's just, like, all of these bad things.
Yeah. Yeah, there was so much emphasis on him, and I was genuinely worried about his arc, because while you're right, in Bingtown, he's technically an adult, in my mind, he's a boy. And so when he and Etta started bonding, and even though Etta was so loyal to Kennett to the point that she's like, no, I know Kennett raped that girl, but I will go away because maybe he'll get tired of her and want me. Like, that's so sad. That's so sad. Anyway, even though Etta's loyalty to Kennit never wavered, Wintrow was 100% in love with Etta. And I was, like, really afraid that it was actually going to go that way. Like, he was going to get her pregnant. Kennit's plan was going to come to fruition. This cycle was going to continue, and Kennit was going to take this child from Wintrow and raise him as his own. And, like, all these, I just was very worried about the path that all this was going in. And I still don't know how I feel. Like, I love that Etta is going to be with somebody who actually cares about her now. Assumedly, we have to kind of fill in blanks. It's not outright said that they're going to end up together, but it seems like it. But, like, it's still weird to me because of, like, he's still a teenager.
Yeah.
In my world, that's still weird.
I think, I do think that, like, his arc... He doesn't get an arc in the later end of the series. I think he peaks early. Yeah. And then it's hard to remember where did we go from here. Because, like, I feel like everyone else, even Malta's mom, I remember her end of arc in Ship of Destiny more than I remember his. Like, I remember him being, like, going to stay with the pirates and that's his life now.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. And I think I do like what was done with him because he was a really great example of the influence that Kennit had, that even Alta's own... Not Alta, Decament. Even Althea's own family chose to believe Kennit over her after Kennit raped her, and him just being so desperate to trust Kennit despite what was right in his face, and Etta knowing what happened but still choosing to side with Kennit. Like, it was a great example of the influence that this man had on the people in his life, and Wintrow being a kid, Wintrow having his own free will taken from him because he wanted to stay at the monastery. Monastery? Is that the word?
I think so. It was the big religion of the area.
Anyway, him having his free will taken from him and then trying to find his way and attaching to someone who didn't deserve his attachment. I did like where that went, but you're right that as far as emphasis put on him, he basically disappeared in the last book.
Because he was still important in Madship because he sets free the one with the memories. I'm vaguely remembering this at this point. Which was then also a moment where Kennit realized he cared about him. Because then he becomes like the speaker for Kennit. So he's like basically a tool for Kennit's arc.
Yes. You're right.
That's what happens. See, this is... Everything else, as you can tell, I've remembered pretty well. But Wintrow is the part that my brain decided was not as important.
Yeah, no. Well, because it feels like that by the end of the series.
Yeah. But I'm actually wondering if he's even on a cover of the original hardbacks, because I have the original hardbacks and they're all beautiful art, and I don't know if Wintrow's on a cover of those books.
Yeah. He was still a sweet child that I wanted to protect. And he was kind of like Malta in that I could see the path that he was going down, and I was like, oh, no. Please let me help you.
I was just glad he wasn't Fitz 2.0, because that could have happened.
Oh. Yeah.
That was a distinct possibility. I also think I really appreciate that this series was third-person perspective.
Yeah.
Like, and we get multiple points of views.
I agree.
I think I really appreciated that. Because I think if we had followed this series through one perspective, I wouldn't have loved it as much.
100%.
I think it's the fact that I have all of these pieces.
100%, I agree. It's such a complex tale, and she did so much with weaving the perspectives together. It wouldn't have worked without being able to be in so many different perspectives. Yeah. And along with that, because I think just in general, for me as a reader, Hobb's writing style works better from third person and multiple POVs because she writes her characters just in a very honest way. She makes them very flawed. Being in one character's head 100% of the time can feel very grueling sometimes, especially when they're making all the wrong choices. Like, imagine being in Malta's head for the entirety of book one. Yeah, it would have made her a lot worse. Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Well, is there anything else you wanted to talk about in the trilogy?
I'm sure there's something big that we have forgotten somewhere along the line. I like Ronica. We don't talk about Ronica, but I thought she was a fun matriarch to have pop in and out.
We don't talk about Bruno either, but, what can be done? Yeah, no, you're right. Ronica was a good character to have, but she didn't have any significant, nothing that I feel like, oh, we gotta talk about this.
She was part of my rage at the beginning.
Yeah.
She was part of my rage.
She
'Cause I'm like, oh, I can tell you're so smart and you've been so duped.
Yeah. We also didn't talk about Althea's sister, other than just talking about her, like, shaming her after she was raped the first time.
Yeah, I mean, she's fine. I mean, her arc I like. I think she's a realistic representation of how someone can be blinded by the dream of the perfect relationship.
Not only
right?
that, but she's also a product of her time as well, in that, like, the way the system is built, and she's just like, okay, I will fit into that system exactly right, and she's a good representation of why it doesn't work.
And, like, I did like that she went to find opportunities. She's like, no, I need to be the one raising Malta, and you guys all need to let me have that space, and you want me to be better at the businesses, so you have to give me the opportunity. Because part of the problem was Veronica didn't let her.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, and it was nice to see her
And we all
stand
have
up
people
for
in our
herself.
lives who parents micromanaged things and didn't let them grow or make mistakes and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that even though her arc was far more on a macro scale, it was nice to see her micro scale. Her arc was smaller than the other ones.
Yes. Itty bitty arc.
But it was still nice to see her actually acknowledge, like, I don't know that I want my husband to come home, because he's not going to be happy with me not being happy with just sliding back into the silent wife role. You know, like, I will keep my vote on the council, and I will, you know, whatever. So that was nice that she, even as a very passive, submissive character, that she still was able to find her own voice within her own story, too.
And I also think Veronica was kind of the key to feeling the emotion of the loss initially. Like, we have a big loss 100 pages into the series, and I feel like because we got a Veronica perspective, it's like, oh, I do feel so sad for you. Like, losing your lifelong partner and stuff. And I think without that, it becomes more of a plot point than an actual emotional moment for these characters for us as readers.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think I still just had a really big grudge against Veronica in the first book, because she was like, your dad wanted to give you the ship, but I convinced him not to. And it's just like, you're the problem? You're the reason we're doing all that we're doing right now?
Yeah, but it was... I think the realism of Hobb books either, like, makes me want to rage, or I'm just like, yes, that's exactly what would happen. There's no in-between.
Yeah, no, you're right. She's really good at getting emotions out of you, one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's, like, even with Tawny Man, as I'm reading, I'm like, well, I have a very visceral, emotional reaction. Like, I don't know if it's the one I'm supposed to have, but it's what I'm having.
Oh, man. All right, well, cool.
Yeah, I think we thought, well, we didn't talk about Malta's brother, but I think he'll be in Rainwild Chronicles, I think.
Oh, the young boy. Oh, yeah, he did end up kind of rising up in the end as well and becoming pretty significant.
He became, like, a speaker for the dragons.
Yeah, and he went to be a foster child in the Rainwilds. So, yeah, he should come up again.
I do think we will. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in Rainwilds, because I do think what's going to happen in the third book of Tawny Man is going to be important for the payoff in Rainwilds. I don't think you need to read the trilogy to figure that out. I think you can definitely have someone tell you what happens in the end of it. I can just see how the two worlds are converging a little bit.
Well, thank you for joining me for the Liveship Traders trilogy discussion.
Yeah.
I guess keep me updated on what you think about the final Fitz books, how you end up liking them. I mean, I'll watch your videos too, so you don't have to.
I mean, yeah, I'll probably have to make a series video on that and stuff for my own personal consistency.
Yeah. So thank you so much for watching this discussion, and thank you, Angela, for joining me. I will have her channel, Literature Science Alliance, linked in the description. Be sure to check that out, subscribe, watch her videos. They're all awesome. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.